Welcome back, everyone, to our learning pod, our history learning pod. We're excited to get started today, and we're just going to jump right into our discussion today. And we're going to start out with a quote to just get our thinking in line with what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so this is a quote from Arnold J. Toynbee. And when you read it, or let's read it together, I want you to tell me, do you agree, disagree, or what would you add or subtract to this quote? It says, civilization is a movement and not a condition, a voyage and not a harbor. So, what do you think about that quote? Do you agree, disagree? What would you add or subtract? And you can put it in the comments below in our YouTube channel. And I respond to all comments. I read all comments, and I'll respond to them as well. So I'll give you 5 Mississippis to give a comment. Okay. Personally, I would put civilization is a movement and a condition, a voyage and a harbor. Let's look at another quote about what civilization is. This is from Paul Theroux. Excuse if I didn't pronounce his name correctly. He says, the measure of civilized behavior is compassion. What do you think about that quote on a scale of 1 to 10? It's interesting when you look into the history, especially of the nation of Israel, and throughout the Torah, Gospel, and the Bible itself, a measure of a civilization was the way they treated their widows and their children, if you're a Bible nerd. But anyway, let's look at one more, which I thought was pretty funny. Brian Aldiss. I'll have to do a deep dive as to who he is, but he made me laugh. Civilization is the distance man has placed between himself and his excreta. That was pretty funny. But that just shows a little challenge with regards to civilization. What is civilization? What does the word mean? How would you even define civilization? Well, let's check it out. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this point, the etymology of the word civilization. And when we use the word etymology, etymology is the study of the origin of words and the way in which their meanings have changed throughout history. So that's a fun study on its own. And it enriches our vocabulary and our understanding of not only the English language, but also of other languages as well, because the English language absorbs so much of other cultures as well as languages. But etymology, definition of civilization. It says the word civilization comes from the Latin civilis, meaning civil, related to the Latin civis, meaning citizen, and civitas, meaning city or city-state. So the basic definition of the word civilization is a society made up of cities. Now, do you see a problem arising with the use of the word cities? In the early development of the term, anthropologists and others use civilization and civilized society to differentiate between societies they found culturally superior, which often they were a part of, and those that they found that were culturally inferior, which they referred to as savage or barbaric cultures. How can we illustrate the challenge? Well, let's look at it. Do you see the challenge? Of course, this is a little humorous, but the term civilization was often applied in an ethnocentric way, with civilizations being considered morally good and culturally advanced, and then other societies as being morally wrong and backward. So this complicated history is what makes defining a civilization a little bit troublesome for scholars, and why the definition today is still in flux. So how would you define a civilization? Well, let's look at a civilization, okay? Let's check this out. And see if you can figure out what civilization we are talking about here. I'm at 4 minutes and 13:12. Okay, let's keep this moving. Can you figure out what civilization this is? What part of the world this is? If you figured out which part of the world it is, you are right if you said South America, and you'd be right even more so if you said Cusco and the Incas, South Central Peru. What makes this place special? It's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the Western Hemisphere. And this was formerly the capital of the extensive Inca Empire. The city stands high in the Andes at the average elevation of 11,150 feet, or 3,400 meters. The air is generally dry, frost is rare, but the Incas, they were a massive empire. The population of the empire at the time of the Spanish conquest, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, in the 1530s may have numbered more than 12 million people. The city itself had tens of thousands of inhabitants, perhaps as many as 200,000. So Cusco and the surrounding area contain extensive Inca ruins that reflect skill in engineering, stonework, and architecture. Guess what time it is for us right now? This is the time for our brain dump. Okay? I gave you a little bit to whet your appetites. Now, what I'd like you to do is brainstorm everything you know or think you know about the Inca Empire. This is your time for a brain dump. I'll give you a couple seconds. Did you figure it out? Place it in the comments below. What do you know about the Incan Empire? What's interesting about the Inca Empire is that it was a large civilization with a government and social hierarchy. It left behind a wealth of art, had a highly developed architecture, but guess what they didn't have? They didn't have a written language. They never developed a written language. However, they did have something very interesting. Let's look at it. Can you figure out what this is? What does that look like? When I first saw this, it looked like it's some sort of beautiful necklace to adorn a woman's neck. But do you know what this is? It's actually spelled Q-U-I-P-U. It's pronounced Kipu. You can make whatever association you need to memorize it. So while they did not bequeath any written records, they did have these colorful knitted knots. And basically, different colored twine had different meanings, and it was basically an accounting system. So imagine that. You're looking at a beautiful form of an Incan accounting system. Wait a minute. No written language, yet a powerful civilization. So another definition of civilization has been a group of people with their own language, their way of life, how they organize laws, culture, religion, acquiring food, and a system of government. Oh man, I'm going into overtime, everyone. So, for you, what are the elements of a civilization? What would you put down in your list of elements of a civilization? Well, I created this little graphic for you all that we can review, and let's look at it to see what the elements of civilization and the structure are. So we start out with food supply, land fertilization, trade surplus, economy, irrigation, technology, the arts, music, fashion, entertainment, written language. And of course, we just learned from that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be civilized and accomplish great things. So we have the arts, we have social structure, who's important. Religion is a key form of civilization or part of civilization. And of course, government. There's another way that we can organize this, and I'm sure you've seen it before. We talked about it, and we're going to go through our classes with this pattern. We won't necessarily outrightly mention it, but you will see the pattern in our learning pods. Grapes, geography, religion, achievements, politics, economics, social structure. Geography, the land climate, where did they live? What was their environment like? How did people adapt to their surroundings? Religion, their belief system, their gods, their worship, their rituals, what did they worship? What did they believe? How did what they believe affect their behavior? Their achievements, what did they bring to the world? Politics, who was in charge? Who were the laws, or what were the laws? And of course, the economics, how did they make a living? What was traded? And then social structure. How was the society organized? Who had power and privilege? Could you move up in society, or are you stuck? And while we're going through these workshops and these history learning pods, make connections to today and whatever country you're in and whatever government you're under, or whatever religion you're a part of, or where you live in your landscape, so that you can make history come alive. Now, some of you are super, I won't say critical, but you're super observant. And you're probably saying, I got to text you, Mistofer Christopher, or whatever your name is, because you can't spell GRAPESS. That is not a typo. There's one more S that we're going to talk about. And we will discuss that in our next class, our next workshop. Okay? Before we leave, we definitely have to leave with you a good note. And if you have an idea for titles of this workshop, please let me know. Okay? But before we leave, we just want to leave you on a high note. And here's your question. What do you call a medieval knight who's always sure of himself? Sir Tainley. All right, everybody. Look forward to see you next time. And as always, please follow, share, like, comment. It helps the channel. And look forward to see you next time. Take care of yourself.